Thank you so much for your patience. We've had some technical glitches and just trying to set up our speakers, but we should be good to go. We've got people online and I'm hoping that they can hear me as well. If you can hear me or can't hear me, just let me know on the chat. Otherwise, a very warm welcome to Henley Business School. And we really hope that you will enjoy the session tonight. It's going to be very interesting. Before I go further, I would just like to say all protocol observed. So stand by for the safety video. Are we good to go? So we're going to play a safety video in case of an emergency, and then we can kick off. Thank you.
So just firstly, can I check, are there any questions regarding the video while Mamu's here so that she can respond, assist, support? None. Okay, so we can begin. Acting President of the BMF, MD of the BMF, Professor Nkuhlu, Professor Jon Foster-Pedley. I was Mpho. I'm going to say it. I said to her I was going to say it in Zulu, Molopyane. She said Molopyane. Right. And the line also to confirm, do we have the DTIC? So we've also got Ms. Malebo Mabitje-Thompson. I'm going to get it right throughout the evening. Okay. BMF members, friends of the BMF, colleagues online, welcome and good evening. On the 8th of February, President Ramaphosa opened up his State of the Nation address by reminding us that this year is 30 years since democracy. He also wanted to remind us of the journey that we've taken. He painted a picture of how people stood in the queues, long queues, in 1994 with the hope of the future to come. He looked at the opportunities created so that we can fulfill the dream of all South Africans and ensure that everybody feels invested, a South Africa that belongs to all who live in it. Post the State of the Nation address, the buzzword was Dinzwalo. I guess by saying Dinzwalo, the president was trying to illustrate the journey since 1994. And we are here to actually review Dinzwalo's journey. But most importantly, I believe we're also here to review our balanced scorecard as a country. Please note, mentioned earlier, we are not here to debate it. We are here to have an open, frank, respectful dialogue. This year, the BMF has adopted the theme, Accelerating Economic Transformation and Inclusion, in order to deepen the gains of democracy. So yes, it is time for a performance review. And very, very important, it is time for a performance improvement plan. We have asked our esteemed and knowledgeable panelists to evaluate the president's plans and talk to us about what they saw him outlining in the Sona. We've also asked them to give us guidelines and insights on how this can be implemented. You're going to be part of the conversation. We'd like to engage you, hear your thoughts as well. However, before we start and before I call the MD, Mr. Ndlovu, I'd like to ask you to please be respectful of our time, be respectful of the panel members, switch off your phones or put them on silent. Please, can I also ask that we have one conversation, which is the one that's going to be happening here in front. Should you have a question, you can either send a question via I think there's a chat, there's also a hashtag. So the hashtags that we've got going, if you want to be on Twitter or on all the social media platforms, we've got hashtag post-Sona dialogue, hashtag social economic transformation, hashtag leadership insights. So for everybody on Zoom, let me repeat it again. Post-Sona dialogue, social economic transformation, leadership insights. For those in my age group, please don't put spaces in between. It's not a sentence, it's all one word. Please, let's make sure we do the right thing. And please post your comments, post your insights, post what you believe should be highlighted. Without further ado, I'd like to call Ukajeni, our MD, Ndlovu, to please come to the front and give us his perspective of what he's expecting of the conversation today.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. You, you know, the earlier greeting, I kind of felt, why is everyone so stiff when Temba was greeting? So I'm not sure as to why. A very good evening to everyone, to all our esteemed guests. I see BMF board members who are here, the acting president who is here, Professor Nkuhlu, who turned 80 last week, and he's the first Black chartered accountant in the history of our country. And it is a privilege for us to host him tonight. And Mpho, I won't attempt to state your surname because I'm Zulu, so I'll get it wrong. So Mpho, welcome from Alex Forbes, and the acting Director General from the DTIC, Ms. Mabitje-Thompson. A very good welcome to you. And also our host this evening, Professor Jon Foster-Pedley, and I'm also an alumni as well of Henley Business School. So thank you very much for hosting the BMF and the post-Sona dialogue. Very briefly from our side in terms of expectation and as to why this conversation is important, when we use the word Sona as an acronym, the letter S stands for succeed. So when we look at the state of the country and look at the state of our professions and us as professionals, because this is a conversation at the level of professionals, we want the country to succeed as we also succeed. And O stands for ownership. We want to own our country, have a sense of ownership, the belief that the country belongs to all of us. And when we look at the national gripes, so to speak, Black people in the country are not necessarily all of them feeling as if there's a sense of ownership in South Africa. And so that's why we have so many diverse views, diverse feelings. And when the Sona comes up, there's mixed feelings because it invokes a different sense of camaraderie, a different sense of thought as to, do I really belong in South Africa? And again, even the middle class, it invokes something else, right? So there's rumors out there about VAT increase, and the middle class is kind of looking at those things more clearly as to say, how are we going to be impacted as the middle class? So all of us see South Africa differently from an ownership point of view, but what we want to really see happen as we move forward is a deep sense of ownership as South Africans. N stands for nurture. We want to learn and relearn and unlearn all the ways and even wrong ways of nurturing relationships. It's one thing to know someone at a personal level. It's another to know them at an institutional level. So the BMF would have relationships as an institution, not as individuals. Henley would have relationships at an institutional level, irrespective of who is in office. So beginning to respect that we need to nurture relationships at an institutional level, and when you have the opportunity to lead at various levels of leadership within an institution, to respect the institution and to nurture those relationships. A lot of the time, a lot of issues break down precisely because of how we are not nurturing relationships. It's not only nurturing relationships, but also nurturing ideas, right? So create spaces like this one so ideas can blossom. And we nurture, we water the ideas, and we champion those ideas. You can only champion them if you give them space. You can only champion them if you nurture them. And A stands for advance views. And I think this is driven primarily, after this I'm going to sit down. I know you all want to listen to Professor Nkuhlu. Advancing views is primarily driven by this process flow. I call it the RRTPL process, which is number one, R, reflection. So we've got to reflect deeply about things. Number two, we then research, right? Those ideas further, deeper. And that drives T, which is thought leadership, right? So it drives thought leadership. What are the views coming out of the research process that can be pursued? And P stands for positioning. Then you take a position. So we must learn to take a position after we've developed thought leadership, after we've been driven by research, after we've reflected on the issue. After positioning, then we begin to lobby for those views. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why we are here. We are participating in that process of reflection, research, thought leadership, positioning, and lobbying for the future. I hope you have a good evening, and that indeed we may take the ideas that will blossom from here and champion them. Otherwise, there was no use to have this post-Sona conversation. Sebo.
Thank you, MD. That will be a roaming mic, so you can keep it with you, and then they will, when the time comes. Okay. I'd like to then call on stage my panel members. Firstly, to call on stage Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu. Happy belated birthday. Thank you so much. Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu has turned 80, the first CA in South Africa, but most importantly, he is the chairman of KPMG South Africa. Next, I'd like to call on stage Mpho Molopyane, who is the chief economist at Alex Forbes. Welcome, ma'am. Followed Pedley, who is our host as well, the Dean and Director of Henley Business School. Welcome, Prof. And then on the line, as we've mentioned earlier, we've got Malebo Mabitje-Thompson, who is the Deputy Director General at DTIC. Welcome, ma'am. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, I can, and thank you very much.
And I've just been corrected. You are not the deputy, you are the director. Thank you so much. Prof, maybe just to start with you in terms of your opening remarks, I'd like you to possibly give us an overview or share your views of the mechanisms that could be employed to address some of the issues that the president raised in the State of the Nation address, and also look at the quality of leadership that we currently have.
Sure. Yes, no, thank you very much to the business school, and thank you to BMF for inviting me. It's always, always welcome opportunities to interact with professionals and just exchange ideas, and also just explore ways in which we can continue to improve this country. I'm going to come to your point, but I'm just going to start by saying that I listened to the president's address, and I enjoyed what he said. I agreed with most of the things that he said, but possibly the only major difference possibly on my side I would have made is that I would have divided the 30 years into segments. I would have said the 15 years South Africa was great. We had clear vision, we had clear policies that were adopted. We managed to establish a firm foundation for dealing with the legacies of apartheid. First of all, politically, in terms of the political systems of our country, and also we had courage to deal with the fact that Black people were disadvantaged by apartheid. We had courage to say we are going to come up with clear policies and programs to address that. And we were able to do that during that first 15 years because we had the moral high ground. It was clear to everyone that we were inspired by a just cause. I'm stealing this phrase from Simon Sinek. Those who know, I'm stealing that from them, but we're being inspired by a just cause. Because we're being inspired by a just cause, it was business felt that it was imperative for them as a sector to accept the leadership of government and actually try to align its own policies and practices with the expectations of government. That's why then when we had the Employment Equity Act, we had the Black Empowerment Act, companies at the beginning were falling on top of each other to be seen to be in line, to be really part of the new South Africa and addressing those. So I would have dealt with that part in that positive way and say that that was great. We laid the foundation and we made major gains in terms of Black advancement, and the environment was positive in business and so on. Unfortunately, then we lost our way from 2009 onwards. We made big mistakes. We almost destroyed the country with corruption and incompetent leadership and corrupt leadership and so on. It's difficult for the ruling party to own to that, but really, if we want to salvage the great achievements of the first 15 years, whoever leads must accept that those were big blunders that almost destroyed this country. We regret it that those things happened, and we disown those, whoever people were doing those things. Having done that, that's the only way you can protect those gains that you had. If you don't do that, you are going to end up with a situation where, because of the erosion of public trust in the African National Congress, you'll find a rejection, all the things that it did, good and bad. And you will end up creating space for conservative elements who never wanted the ANC to have Black empowerment and transformation in the first place. And they take advantage of the fact that it now becomes difficult for people to defend policies that were started by it. So it's very important. We disowned this 2009 era. Unfortunately, what makes it difficult to disown it is because at the end of the first president who took over in 2009, we're not able to make a complete break with his legacy. We simply took someone who was actually his deputy and actually part of those decisions. And really it became difficult for the ANC to claim the moral high ground, to say that this is a new start. So those who lead organizations, especially here, I'm in a business school, I think they would understand that. If we want to make a start, a company has been destroyed by unethical conduct, harm that it caused to society. How do you do that? You remove that leadership completely and make a new start and bring people from outside that would establish a new culture and embed a new aspiration. So we failed to do that. So the difficulty we have then is that President Ramaphosa may have tried in this speech to say the ruling party with him as president remains committed to transformation, to inclusivity and all that. But if you do that, having lost public trust, it's very difficult to say what is going to come out of that. And whether you as BMF, for instance, you would want to associate yourselves with that when you know that the party and the person who's saying this has lost public trust. Loss of public trust is not a political thing that I'm saying. If you, how you measure this thing, in 1994, the ANC had a mandate from the people of this country, not members of the ANC, 62%. It increased in 1999, and it got to 70% approval in 2004. It started declining. No one can deny that, because the decline is because of poor leadership, departing from the inspirations and visions of the first 15 years that destroyed them. So the big challenge then is this: having lost the moral ground, you as BMF and other organizations, it's going to be a tough ride in the coming years in terms of continuing with the gains. You need a champion. You need political leadership that is convinced that, because now we've got a chaotic situation in which there's mounting pressure to reverse some of the policies that we started. But again, I'm afraid, having done excellent work in the first 15 years, we're not covering ourselves in glory. How do we explain a situation where you send hundreds of young people, the best of our matric graduates, you encourage them to go and do medicine, study and become, and it takes 7 years or 8 years to do that. You had all that time to plan and make sure that they have jobs at the end of that. How do you recover from that? How do you recover as a government if you make mistakes like that? So really, we made great strides, but unless we segment these things, we own what happened there, and that we were very supportive and of the policies, and we're satisfied with the direction. But things went wrong, and it's going to be difficult. Actually, the evidence is what I'm saying. You can look at what happens now if there is, in the past, when there's a big company like a mining company, it wants to appoint a chief executive or senior executive. It would have to go to government, and actually for a number of years, they make sure that they all would appoint Africans and black candidates. But now that has changed. Why? We have lost the moral high ground. When you have lost the moral high ground, no one fears the BMF or any progressive organizations here. They know that you are compromised yourselves, so they can talk themselves into justifying whatever they do. So there's going to be a lot of this talk and justifying reversals of transformation. So I'm sorry, it's not a good story, but I thought, let me just put it like that. This is how I see things. So it's going to be tough going forward. We made a good start, but really going forward, unless I can't see how things are going to get better. Political, major corporates feel that now there is no one with higher ethical and moral power that they would want, because they want to be seen, to be associated, to be aligned with him. There's no such. So we're you are on your own. Thank you.
Sure. I guess that is a good reaction. Everybody's just looking with their eyes open. I'm not sure what's happening online, but I think, yes, Prof, you are right. We have seen the stagnation of transformation. We have seen how organizations simply, comfortably, just appoint randomly, even import skills when we have a shortage of opportunities in the country. And we used to have organizations that, like you said, Prof, deliberately made a concerted effort to do the right thing when it came to transformation, but we're no longer there anymore. But I think as well, you spoke about policies, and I think the DG will be able to maybe give us some insights in terms of what they're going to do about the policies that they have and the implementation thereof. Also, Mpho, over the last 30 years, there's been a range of economic scenarios positioned in South Africa. And many a times, again, over the last 30 years, you hear how they're doing the groundwork. Groundwork has been done, groundwork has been done. And we're still doing the groundwork, but we're not moving from the ground or from the gravel. We'd like to hear from you about your views on possible reconstruction and recovery in terms of inclusion and removing barriers in these institutions.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here, to be engaging with you. So for me, I'd also first like to start with reflecting on the Sona and my take on it. And, I think I do agree with Monday that everybody experienced and received the Sona quite differently. So for me, this year's Sona, I must say that it was slightly more positive. It was a welcome change to the format of the Sona. And I guess it also made sense because it's an election year. There couldn't be a lot of promises on the table. We need to be realistic, especially when opinion polls are also showing that the National Party is likely to lose its outright majority. So there's definitely concerns about, does the National Party, does the ANC come back, and, with what strength does it come back, and will it be able to continue effecting change? But what stuck with me with regards to the Sona was the story of Tinzwalo. I know it was a buzzword. I know it was a buzzword, but for me, it really stuck with me because I could relate, right? I could relate with the story of Tinzwalo. So the president took us through, Tinzwalo, who was born post-apartheid, and, through the government's social assistance, was able to get decent education, free health care, and, higher tertiary learning. And through that social assistance, and we tend to overlook this when we talk about, social assistance. We tend to concentrate on the direct transfers, which are the grants. But there's a lot of social assistance from the government, and many of us have, benefited from that. Tinzwalo was able to get a tertiary education and decent roof over her head. She was able to study with electricity, not candles, and, achieve higher learning qualifications and enter the very competitive labor market, given that growth has not kept up with the population increase. So yes, employment opportunities have been quite limited. But I could relate with Tinzwalo. Yes, I'm not Tinzwalo. I must admit that I was slightly more privileged because my mom was a nurse. Yes, back then, nurses didn't earn much, but, I was still much better than most Black people in rural areas. So I could relate, and I could also further relate because of the opportunities I've had as a Black person, as a young Black woman. And, for me, it was quite encouraging because, with the story of Tinzwalo, I was also able to sit back and reflect and take the wins of the past 30 years. We still have a very long way to go, I do admit, but we've had some wins. If it wasn't for the work and the effort and the fighting of many of the members sitting here today, I don't think I would be in the position that I am. And I think we need to take those wins. I think it's good wins. Yes, the past 15 years, have been quite discouraging, but we can overcome that. We can still continue on the gains that we've made. And to continue on the gains that we've made, it's the question around inclusion. It's the question around inclusion. It's the question around how do we consolidate the gains and build on the gains that we've made so that everybody can enjoy, and live a better life in South Africa. So for me, the issue of inclusion, I think it's a multifaceted issue, and it requires a holistic approach so that we are not continuously coming back to the drawing table to say, what are we not getting right? Where are we going wrong? I don't think it's a simplistic issue. I think one, at the core, it deals with culture. It deals with corporate culture. And it also deals with inclusion. To effect corporate culture, it deals with inclusion and representation. Do we have inclusion at a strategic level, right? Do we have inclusion at a strategic level where decisions are being made? What is quite surprising is that when you look at senior leadership, executive leadership in corporates, it's not inclusive, it's not transformed. And yet companies are always telling us about how they're transformed, about their PEE scores. And if you look at their transformation, it's mid to junior level, you know. And why is that? Why is it transformed at mid to junior level and not at a level where strategic decisions are being made? Where's the bottlenecks? If we have enough mid to junior level leadership, why are they not advancing to executive levels? Where are the gaps? The boards, you know, what's happening? There's a huge mismatch there and huge gap that we need to address and understand. Where are the bottlenecks? Why are mid-level managers not advancing to executive levels to lead these prestigious organizations? So I think we need to understand that first. And then I think secondly, when I think about inclusion, it's also about diversity, right? I think representation, we tend to be quite narrow in terms of how we think about it. We tend to make it a black and white issue, and it's really not a black and white issue. It's also really a diversity issue, because we can be all black, but we come from very different backgrounds and very different lived experiences. And we may not be able to, you know, when we are on the table, I may not be able to relay or, I may not be able to relay other Black people lived experiences. So I could be at a very senior level, but there could still be no diversity in the organization because of the way I grew up. If I grew up in a very urban area and went to, you know, very posh schools, my experience is going to be different. The way I approach things is going to be very different. And I may not necessarily see that the company is not inclusive because I'm being included. I can relate, right? So we then also need to think about the diversity aspect. And I think as Black people, we need to be aware of this, that yes, we are Black, we may see each other on the table, we are all in the table, we're being invited, but we have different lived experience. And I think we need to acknowledge that, and we need to invite people from various backgrounds to the table. So that's the diversity angle. The third, I think the other aspect of inclusion, we need to understand why, how can we affect the change, right? So we are saying, okay, you know, there's no transformation at senior level, there is no inclusion, there's no diversity. Why, you know, is there no diversity? Does, you know, is it not, does it not make business sense? Do the people making the decisions and running the companies, do they not want to transform? And, you know, why is that? And how can we, as the majority of South Africans, the rightful owners of the land and minerals and resources and the wealth of this country, how can we effect change? Most of the time, change comes when it hits the bottom line. When it starts hitting the bottom line, that's when everybody gets an incentive to change. So it then goes back to the point about representation and inclusion. So as Black people, when we do get to those senior executive levels and are able to make changes, are we aware, you know, do we direct business rightfully so? So we continuously need to be aware of that, I think. But we also need to think about, do we move away from, you know, being polite about the transformation agenda, the inclusion agenda? Do we now go with the stick approach? Do we have the ability to go with the stick approach? Do we have power? But what have we built? Where are the Black-run businesses and organizations? What have we built? Are we able to direct business to each other? And I think it also goes back to, at a personal level, are you intentionally, at a personal level, are you intentionally supporting other Black businesses? Do you go out of your way to seek to do business with other Black businesses? Intentionally so. We have to be intentional. We have to be intentional about our actions. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. We're not going to take it forth if we're not intentional.
Thank you so much, Mpho. And I think when you started, you and Prof are saying the same thing around celebrating the first 15 years, right? There was those years of happiness, of success, etc. And you're also right, it's too soon for people to start complaining about transformation fatigue. A lot more needs to be done. They do say that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And who creates the culture? It's the leaders.
Yes.
Are the leaders intentional? Are they still committed to this journey? Prof said, actually, they're not, because there's nobody who's holding them to account. And you also said to us that representation matters. If I do not see somebody on top who looks like me, I have no intention of firstly staying in that organization because it might not exude the culture that I want and I may not feel like I belong. And the other challenge that we have, you're asking about these young guys, these middle managers, where are they, why are they not going up? There is this element and this thought that they are always kept under somebody's wing. I will guide, I will coach, I will mentor. They will stay under that person's wing because what are they doing? They're helping that person fly. So how do we then get them out from there and allow them to soar on their own to take up those positions and lead organizations that will lead us towards transformation? So thank you for that, Asim. Now I'd like to hand over to the DG. Malebo, I am certain that we all agree that implementation of promises made is as important as the implementation thereof. I mean, if we just look at the Sona, you could take it as a strategy document, right? The strategy was presented to us. Now it's around how we're going to implement it. If you're in corporate, we then say this particular department or this cluster, or this business unit has this particular responsibility. And designing good policies is one thing. Implementing them is where we hit the ground running. So, Malebo, can you please maybe assist us in evaluating the government's policies and programs that are going to support the initiatives that the President mentioned in his State of the Nation address?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I hope I'm loud and people can hear me clearly. I apologize, first of all, that I was supposed to be with you. I'm very jealous of everybody seated there having a very interesting discussion, and I have to join you online. Unfortunately, one or two things came up that I had to deal with, but I did want to honor the appointment and the commitment. So good evening, everyone. Yes, my name is Malebo Mabitje-Thompson. I'm currently the Acting Director General of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. I've been listening quite carefully at what has been said, and there's very little I would disagree with. I myself, as a South African, primarily, again with a lived experience, having worked also in the corporate sector, can relate to some of the things that have been said. You know, even the issue of why you do have Black talented managers always in perpetual training. Most of us who come from the corporate sector, you know that that's something that is quite common. I used to have a manager, every time he had to go abroad because he was in a senior management training course, and I was working for a multinational, so they will take them abroad every quarter. Before he leaves, he would then make it a point to remind me that he would like to still have his job when he comes back. So I must work very hard, but remember that he needs his job when he comes back. I'm saying this because what I thought the president was doing, and with the case study really of Tintswalo, was just showcasing some of the achievements that have been made. And those achievements were not about Dintswalo, who is just a passive recipient of government support, but a fighter in her own right, and somebody who has urgency and is taking their future into their hands. But the state is helping her to fight headwinds that she on her own wouldn't be able to fight through maybe funding that will come even at a young age, helping her to be fed so that she can sit in class and be able to focus and concentrate and right through her life. Not that Dintswalo is lazy. Dintswalo has circumstances that requires a caring state to come in and do what it needs to do. We need to do more of those type of interventions. And I think in the department where I'm at, particularly on the issue of transformation, there's been a shift. There has been an achievement. If you would recall, when we started, particularly on the Black economic empowerment journey, using the legislative tool of Black Empowerment Act, which we will be celebrating. I think it really finishes its 20 years, the Triple BEE in April of this year. When we started, the focus was how do you transform the economy, and the first leap was through ownership. And the focus was on trying to help individuals really get shares, and hopefully with share ownership, they themselves can then be agents of transformation and help transform and help bring other people into meaningful economic participation. And it became very clear that that on its own was insufficient. That's when the broad-based, when we started, it was the Black economic empowerment. Then we came in with broad-based Black economic empowerment policy. And in that, a big adjustment was on who do you empower. It wasn't an abandonment of empowering individuals to own, but it was also about broadening ownership as far as communities were concerned, so that they can have important stakes, particularly in businesses that were in their localities. And one of the sectors where we saw that taking shape was in sectors such as mining. It wasn't all as rosy as we would have wanted it to be, but it was a statement of intent to say we believe that enterprises have a responsibility to also come in and do empowerment, but that empowerment could also take a broader shape than just giving a few people shares. Then we came in 2006, and this one I was an active part of. We said no. Let us look closely, not just at the people receiving shares, but let's look closely at how do we empower, particularly Black people, to get into the productive sectors of the economy. Not just sitting in a boardroom of somebody's company, but in a company that they own. And we worked on that policy for a long time. There's an institution, I'll never mention their name, but I'll always remember their experience, who came in when we said that, no, we need this. And we were coining the phrase, saying that these are Black industrialists, that we need them in all sectors of the economy, in aerospace, in defense. We need them in the blue and ocean economy. We need them in all sectors of the economy. And they did a research and they came back and they said, no, these people are only in catering. You can find some in clothing and textile. You can find some here. So even the slowness of progress that we are all observing isn't always about lack of intent from, say, from a policymaker's view. It's also even the people that policymakers have surrounded themselves with, who they are hearing from, who is helping create policy, that in a way, some of them are intent on holding us back. And if you do not push hard to say we will go beyond your imagination of what Black people can do to what we know Black people are already doing, you're going to find that we always have these policies that I think the policy intent is the strongest thing about it, but everything about implementation is very weak. And that's what we found. And when we came up with the Black Industrialist Program, most of you would know there was a lot of pushback. We're told that there's a list of cadres that are going to be beneficiaries of this thing. The people that were fighting the Black Industrialist Program couldn't care a bit about whether they were cadres, whether they were special people. That wasn't the fight. The fight was that we were now touching the nub of what is the South African economy. And there was a lot of noise. And I agree with the professor that when you lose moral ground, even the things that you ought to win easily because they are the correct things to do, people who are detractors find it very easy to make you lose your way. And when we implemented that program, a lot of our time was spent on trying to explain to people how this is not about exclusion, but that there is a business case in a country like South Africa, that you have to include people more. That if you leave the vast majority of our people outside the real economy, you're actually starving the ability of the economy to grow as fast as it needs to grow. That business case had to be made. In any normal society, that comes without say. And this is the kind of pushback that we were dealing with when we were rolling out the Black Industrialist Program, and we continue to deal with it. And with the implementation of the program, then came something new. Now, even Black people are fronting. Even Black people are undermining the very policy instrument that is supposed to assist them and assist others. And now you have to deviate and redirect resources to deal with fronting and all that, only because you said, can we have the people in the real economy coming so that we can support them? And then, as a bureaucracy ordinarily does, in order to make sure that we are doing what the policy says we must do, then there's that problem of now over-bureaucratizing a program that is supposed to assist. And then now a number of our Black industrialists have been assisted. We could have done more, we should do more, and we are going to do more. But all these kind of bureaucratic steps that we put in the process, just to make sure that now you don't have the wrong people being the beneficiary of what is essentially an important program to transform the economy. And then you would have seen of late that we then went further. And then we are now highlighting with everything that still needs to be done, that expansion of ownership by employees in companies that they have sweated and spent their lives to help build. And this is the work where we are saying that those employees must find themselves in part ownership of these companies. The relationship can't just end at wages. And there are some companies that are responding to that. And as we've seen in this BEE journey, there are also those that are finding what essentially are damning shortcuts to what is an important program to transform the economy. And if you ask me about our scorecard, I think as a country that is 30 years old, we have pushed and we've pushed hard. We do need to do more. We do need to do more, and the second panelist spoke about it, also around ethical leadership. ethical professionals right through, not just the leadership, ethical professionals right through, and our own ability to be able to, when we're in positions, not allow ourselves to be subsumed by those positions. I see a lot more professionals, government liaison officers coming here to tell me how their company have been transformed when you look at it, nothing has been done, but it's a Black person coming here to convince us that no, let us not do 1, 2, 3 because we've done so well in this and this and that. And in doing that, literally undermining what is a historic journey of a nation because of a job. I'm not saying that those pressures are not real for Black professionals. Like I said, I come from the corporate sector, but we do need to find a way to deal with those so that we don't undermine the onward march of the economy. When the president highlighted some of the infrastructure programs, I thought they also were talking of hope. Some of these programs are very important, including in rural areas, so that we don't have children who have to cross us just to go to school. And South Africa, in a way, it's a home of extremes. That sometimes when we talk, and it's important. It's an important point to note that we do have different experiences. When we talk of people who have to cross rivers, get themselves wet, books wet, because a bridge which was really just something that needed a long-term resolution was just washed away, and they've never had that bridge before. Our role as professionals, whether it is enough that we go home with our shiny shoes and our Mercedes Benzes coming from Gauteng, or whether we should actually be important change agents in our own localities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, DG. I think it's sad what you mentioned around the fact that there's gatekeepers who ring fence opportunities and are unethical and unscrupulous about it and unapologetic about it. I think it's really, really sad. It really seems like inclusion has now become exclusive, which is, again, a sad reality. The DG spoke about the balanced scorecard, or the scorecard of the country. If you can maybe also just go onto our hashtag again, hashtag post-Sona dialogue, hashtag social economic transformation, and hashtag leadership insights, and maybe share your view in terms of our balanced scorecard. If you were sitting doing the performance appraisal of the country, what would you rate us? Is it green? Is it amber? Is it red? Would you like to maybe differentiate which is amber, which is red, which is green? Please share those insights with us, because that would be very, very interesting from our perspective. Prof Foster-Pedley, there's an African proverb that says, a child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. We cannot stress enough the challenges that we face, or the communities has faced, or society has faced in our country. However, it seems like we cannot also stress enough the importance of community empowerment and social investment. In your view, what are your thoughts on what we should be doing to do better, to improve those scenarios?
Thank you. And thank you for the, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for the previous answers, which were really educational. I'd just like to comment on Sona for a second, if I may.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. I think from my perspective, we would expect an electioneering Sona. So you would expect a story of many years of success to lay the grounds of what has improved. And I think a lot really, really has improved. I think what Professor Wiseman, I love the fact that Wiseman is a wise man, is said about the period in the middle. I think you have to expect things like this in life. You know, how many of we have not had a time in our life when we've not been everything we want to be, and when we've kind of let ourselves down? I'm sure I have, or we've been really down. So do we believe in redemption for ourselves and for actually a country? And I do. And I don't think it's bad. I think I often defended Africa in my time, saying Africa, and I do a lot, is a bit bipolar. At one moment you've got an extreme up, and then you've got an extreme down. When you're up, everyone's shouting about it. When it's down, everyone is despair. But Hans Rosling, the economist, you would know, did wonderful statistics in a book called Factfulness, showing that over a long period of time, in spite of all this bipolar ups and downs, the trend was hugely upwards. And we might be in a down at one moment, but it tends to pull itself up because of the nature of humans. So I think Sona was very much, debating and putting a lot of things on the table. What was missing, of course, was anything particular about timelines or implementation. I think what was also missing, it was very interesting, was any really big promises. And I take that as a very positive thing, because if you're going to make large electioneering promises that you can't deliver, you're not being very honest. What it does also imply is that there's a discipline behind what's going on, and that the Treasury discipline is actually starting to have some effect. That what's going on in the public sector and government, particularly trying to put some disciplines and good use of money for the people, is starting to have some effect. So when we were talking about inclusion, what struck me when we were talking about it is that beyond inclusion is belonging. Now you can see that I'm an English bloke. I've been here for however many years I have, why am I here? I don't know. But it's not about South Africa. It's about people. It's about what we do as an educator for people. So educators are not particularly nationalistic. They're humanistic. They'll look at you or you or you, and they will know from long experience what somebody who doesn't believe they can do something they can do. And so when I sit on a podium, we're having graduations, 1/3 of the chamber is the graduates, the other 2/3 is the families. And that 2/3 are people who have 1, 2, 3 generations are applauding that their kids are doing what you've done. And trouble is that only 5% of school starters in South Africa, 4% according to Blade and Zamandi, get degrees within 6 years. In Finland, it's 55%. So social, who fills the gap? Business, I don't believe, should be or is driven by profit. And I'll come back to that in a moment. I don't think I think it's foolish to imagine government can do everything. Government are just people. They're doing their best. They can't do everything. They're not our great savior. And nor can political parties, because they come and go, and and as we've seen, they thrive and they fall and they thrive again. But what does work are people like Welcome over here, running a social enterprise, the Bright Spark Foundation, where he's taking kids who have been in very difficult circumstances, most of you I know, and not you, but some have been through all very hard times at home or substance abuse and other forms of abuse. And you're working to give these people fantastic opportunities. One of them has just gone to university, I believe. Is that right, Welcome? And so what is being filled up now is a society full of people like this doing something. Why aren't we helping them? And the other thing about business, I would say, and what really matters is that business shouldn't be driven by profit. Profit is a reason that you stay alive. Business is driven by creating something that we want, by creating value. And so no business can really survive if it doesn't give a value to humanity, value to something, to you and me. And by creating businesses to do that, it's incredibly hard, especially when you're international. So to get the skills to do business is very hard. And when you've got 95% of the population not able to get that, you have to ask, wait a minute, what are the fundamental factors that are stopping South Africa from growing? You've got the highest Gini coefficient in the world. It's one of the highest employment rates in the world, one of the highest not in employment educational training rates in the world, about 33% for youth, probably more. Probably got an actual effective unemployment around not 33%, but around 50, 60% in some cases, particularly among youth. So how can you recover from that? And it's not a short-term thing. What's missing is an absolute focus and opportunity. None of our children have a future unless all the children have a future. And those children are locked in communities, locked in wherever they are, not able to get the skills that they can do. I believe we all have more or less the same intelligence. We're born all pretty much the same. And I can give you evidence of that from our students here who graduate with MBAs in blind assessments where they're 80% Black. Now they were 20%, 30% 12 years ago. And they're blind assessed with the Malaysians, with the Finnish, with the Scandinavians, the Germans, the Maltese, and the English. Nobody knows who they do. But our MBA students do as well, don't they, Monday? As well, if not better. He's just succeeded. As well as better as these international people. So there's no deficit of capability in South Africa. There's a deficit of fundamental discipline and basic opportunity for people, making sure that the people who can build the businesses have the skills to build the businesses, because you can't survive in business without skills. So I believe that transformation and all that is a result. I even believe that, you know, diversity is a result, not necessarily put in. That it's an inevitable outcome of a whole of the population having the capabilities which allow them to have fair opportunity. So I do believe that we miss this, and we miss the importance of education, and we miss the importance of really getting beyond what we're doing and seeing that our job is to help other people succeed, particularly in society. And that's what I believe.
Thank you so much, Prof. A while ago, I saw a survey, or I think some insights from South African Graduate Employers Association, where they were showing the views in terms of how many children go into the education system and how many actually end up coming out. So they were looking at from primary school to high school, and then going into universities. And then they broke it down into the various qualifications or faculties. So if they looked at, for example, actuarial science, which is a critical skill in South Africa that we need, you'll find, first of all, there's an issue around how many people get into the courses at the universities. And then let's say 300 go in, and then you find that only 15 to 20 actually graduate. Then those 15 to 20 are what corporates are chasing, and they will throw everything at them, right? And then you also then have to look at the demographics of those 15 to 20. So the challenges are broad. And a while ago, I was speaking to a lady who most of you may know, Masingita Masunga. When you're talking about, and I think, Mpho, you also spoke about diversity and inclusion. She kept saying that it's so hard when transformation is not impactful, or you don't see the results of transformation, because can you imagine how difficult it is as a Black female trying to break all these glass ceilings, and now they're becoming concrete and they're becoming steel and all of that. And then on top of that, to be disabled. The challenge for some of the people in the country that we don't realize. So thank you so much, the panelists, for those insights. There's positive messaging. There is something that we're also being left to think about, right? We are going to start taking questions from the line, so the colleagues on Zoom. I've got a tablet here that I will get, but we're also going to start on the floor. But maybe just to kick things off, Mpho, I've got a question around something that I saw online, right? Around the regulations around the visa, right? I just want to hear what your views are, because obviously, I mean, the president wrote there that where he sees this going is to bring skill into South Africa, to grow the economy, right? I think the biggest driver is to grow the economy because opportunities will be created, etc. Somebody else may be sitting there to say, just like the prof said, we don't have a lack of skills, we don't have a shortage in South Africa. However, when this visa comes into play, there are people who are saying that organizations are going to find it easy to then say, okay, I'm not going to look, I'm not going to advertise, I'll just bring in.
I didn't say we don't have a lack of skills in South Africa, because we have a massive lack of
Sorry,
skills.
we've got a massive lack of skills.
We don't have a lack of capability and intelligence.
Apologies, Prof. Okay, so we've got the people, right, who need to acquire the capability, who have the intelligence. Yeah. When this visa comes into play, will organizations be held accountable for those ambitious transformation targets, EE? Because it's going to be easy. In the past, you had to justify why you are going to bring somebody from outside the country. You had to prove that you've done everything you can to find the skill in the country before you import. Now we are saying that we're going to put in policies to make it easier, but there is a positive side to it. I want to hear your views though, Osman.
Right. So for me,
Sorry, can't hear her.
So for me, the South African economy is the most bizarre. It's the most bizarre for me in a sense that we speak about high unemployment rate, right? Our unemployment rate is one of the highest out there in the continent. So we have a high unemployment rate. Then we talk about lack of skills, right? Talk about lack of skills. We'll also talk about, in the same breath, a bloated government workforce. And in the very same breath, we'll also talk about we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough teachers. Then we'll also say we have doctors that just graduated that are sitting at home and don't have jobs. So make it make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. So with the issue of the visa, I understand there may be certain areas where we don't have the requisite skills, but then we also need to be intentional about it. It cannot be perpetual visas. No, it can't be. We need to be honest. What are we going to do with this large unemployed workforce? What are we going to do with over 60% of young people sitting at home? They don't have job opportunities. People want to apply themselves. They want to feel that, they're part of the country. No, I don't think people are happy sitting at home and getting grants, getting 350. Think about it. Who of us here, 350 bucks are in a day? At one go, right? And this is, we're talking about, we're going to, be extending the basic, social distress fund. No, it's not enough. We cannot be turning into a social state when we have high unemployment rates, especially young people sitting at home. So we need to be intentional to say that, okay, we're bringing this skilled labor. What's going to be the skill transfer that's going to take place over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
Because it cannot be perpetual. Yeah. When our people are sitting at home without jobs and they're supposed to wait for 350, when others are getting how much? Over 100K because they have those skills. And I think it also speaks to the education outcome. So we need to be intentional about, okay, how are we going to get this unskilled labor force to be skilled, to be able to take up these positions? And it goes back to the education outcomes and to what you're saying around, kids that get university entrance, but are able to go through that schooling system. What support measures are we going to put in place to ensure that our young people go through the education system and are able to pass and be competent and take up all these positions that we say we don't have the skilled labor for? So we need to be intentional.
Thank you so much.
It can't be perpetual visas.
Thanks for that. Prof?
Yeah. Let me just make a comment on this, because it links to the whole question of transformation. I said at the beginning that we worked with government through advocacy as Black professionals in particular to get that employment equity, to get BE, and we managed to hold companies to account sometime. For me, those were very important interventions to deal with entrenched racism. The fact that people who were running business had no confidence in Black people. So we had to force that change and set targets and so on. That was very important. But really, that could not be the only intervention. Where actually, as South Africans, we have just don't get it, is that in the long term, what really gets countries to develop and really deal with unemployment is when you deal with the scientific and technological capabilities of the nation. See, if you look at the Asian countries, this is what they did. Our education system is not intentionally and purposely directed at building scientific and technical capabilities of our people. So it's ridiculous. The quality, the curriculum is wrong, the teaching is wrong, and the whole thing is wrong. We're not taking science. So even now, we talk about these matric results and so on. No one is talking about what is being taught and what capabilities, knowledge capabilities, skills, scientific things. So I would ask that, as professionals, because we're already educated, what is really clear to us is that we must talk about discrimination and racism that prevents us from getting senior positions. But the bigger thing that is going to leave the majority of Africans as an underclass in this country is what I'm talking about, is the quality of education, the fact that is not intentionally and purposely aimed at building the scientific and technical capability of the country. So this is a major oversight, or something that I'm afraid we have failed to grasp all these years. When we try to deal with education, we lower the required comments for passing. We don't get it, that this thing is about capabilities in terms of knowledge, in terms of mindset, in terms of, we don't get it. So really, I'm afraid this high unemployment, all this thing, over the 30 years, at a structural level, we have not even started to address them. So this is a major thing that requires a major advocacy by the country. In addition to saying racism and negativity towards Black people must not really be allowed to prevent Blacks from advancing into a managerial position. There must be target, there must be monitoring, and make sure those things are achieved. But only nationwide, getting the underclass to reduce. I'm not going to be long on this, but let's Mbeki, many years ago, he pointed this thing out. We've got an underclass of Africans who pass matric and are good for nothing. They cannot go to university. They don't have any knowledge to do anything for themselves. And we have many who drop out of schools. And those numbers are increasing post-1994. We are building an underclass of Black people. Those people are going to turn against us, the few of us who are able to actually get. So this is the fundamental issue. We need advocacy. And really, when I look at these political parties still today, even ourselves as professionals, we are not doing enough advocacy on building these capabilities. Like, I hope it's going to come from somewhere. Unless we address this thing, as Africans in particular, we are going to be even 10, 20 years from now, be complaining about lack of meaningful participation in the economy, because the majority of our people are not getting quality education that gives them the necessary capabilities.
Prof, I'd like you to come in, but I also wanted you to maybe, you are in this space in terms of handling, you do a lot of work with corporates, right? And how is it working together and partnering? Is there no opportunity for corporates in partnership with educational institutions to do better? Because sometimes as well, the output, so you'll get the kids who go into university, but maybe what is also being taught is not aligned to what you need in the world of work. How are you guys working on that partnership to make sure that the output is actually something that can be utilized and can grow in the world of work? And also making sure that opportunities are available. I mean, I see some universities doing work readiness programs, for example. That's allowing you to be able to pass an interview. That's allowing you to get into that world of work, get a laptop, but it is not teaching you how to advance when you get there, how to build your network, how to find a coach or mentor or sponsor that will actually assist you in getting up in the ranks.
Right. Okay. Firstly, thank you. Thank you. Those were absolutely wonderful words, and which I fully and totally agree with. And I think we have to work together to make it happen. I mean, I think we need a sense of activism. I think Sherlock Holmes, a famous detective, said that once you've excluded everything else, whatever is left, however improbable, is the truth. So why don't we have an education system? Do people not want people to be educated? I don't think that's the case. Do we have a too high belief in our education institution? Yes, we do. I think decolonization of education is not the syllabus, it's of the institutions. And it's not of the color of the institutions, it's of the implicit belief of what a university should be. A university in this world's got to be something different. It's got to go to people, it's got to give them hope, it's got to give them confidence. You know, the OECD said that South Africa, of the skills we do have, only 55% of them are suitable for our current economy. 45 aren't even suitable for this economy. let alone when you look at the difference between Vietnam some years ago, which had an agrarian and textile-based economy, and now has one of the most amazing diverse economies, sponsored by China, sure, of high tech and, you know, and chip manufacture and everything else in multiple sectors. It's a rich, vibrant economy. And South Africa is still digging things out the ground and selling it, primarily with some manufacturer. The trouble with that is when you dig things out the ground and sell it, if that's all you do, it's very easy to steal. People can take that stuff. Money goes to somebody, and if you're not ethical, you can take it offshore to Dubai, wherever it is you go, very, very easily. You know, democracies are very easy to steal. And so we actually have to be very activist. And I believe in, I push something called corporate activism, that when organizations go wrong, we should have a way to really teach people to hold the organizations themselves to kind of, it takes two to corrupt. It doesn't just take government, it takes businesses, it takes two to corrupt. It always has done and always will do as long as life goes. So when it comes to the education, what corporates could do, I don't think it's as easy as that. I believe exactly what the professor said about technical skills and high-tech skills, but I also deeply believe in management skills. You need to use money and use it well and solve problems and be lean with it and get outcomes. That takes time. And so I think work readiness is good, but who's going to pay for it? Because universities are wasting money or not using it appropriately. We have to survive on our own wits. We've grown from 5 people with 20 graduates to 2,000 graduates in 12 years, purely on by producing value to people. And we deeply believe in this country and the people of this country, because we see them and we look in our eyes and we say, I know you can do more. I know that. We've seen it so many times and we know that. We don't believe it, we know it. So how can we get you to do that? So I think the corporates have to get on board with saying they're not living in an isolation economy away from society. Business is done in the society. So bring people on board and do something and engage and take accountability for what you do. Put money back in where you've got it. And maybe you won't make such big profits, but in the long term, you'll be far more sustainable in South Africa.
Thank you, Prof. I'd like to then bring in the DG into the discussion, right? When you spoke, DG, earlier, you spoke about the fact that there are policies, there've been gatekeepers, etc. But as we sit here, we're civil society, we are lobbyists, we are corporates. If you were to put together a call of action, what would you say you need from us to make sure that these things happen, to make sure that implementation happens, and we're not sitting here after another Sona, having another dialogue and discussing those very same issues and discussing gatekeepers, etc. What would you say would be the plan going forward for us, DG?
No, thank you very much. And thank you for the very engaging discussions we've had thus far. I think it's not even something for you, it's something for all of us. I think increasingly I'm really getting convinced that building a nation is a project that takes all stakeholders. And that requires also at a personal level, personal responsibility that we do need to build. We've got a nation to build. And which generation are we? We're not just anybody. We are kind of the generation that has to bequeath to those that come before after us a better country. And we're going to have to make it work out of whatever we now have. And again, agreeing with the observations that were made previously about some of the missteps and some of the good things that were done previously. So if there was a call to action, it's not a call that I myself don't take seriously, would be that instead sometimes of us taking the view that we don't have the power to change things. And here it's in the context of the Black Management Forum. This will be professionals at work, professionals aspiring to enter the workplace, is that we take back our power. We take back our power for our communities. And we also do not assimilate so much in the different corporate cultures, that we lose that big call that is on all of us to build our country. And even if I were to leave government one day, that will be something that I will take to the next place, and to be just not be satisfied with the fact that, you know, I'm the only one who gets to do this. I'm the only one who gets to do this. That social corporate mindedness, that we bring it back, that we will bequeath something very good, and we've got a responsibility to bequeath same to others. And from that belief, a whole series of things come. There was an issue about the economic system, and all these assessments that are being made about even our own education system in South Africa. What most analysts don't actually say in these analyses, including on the education system, is how in various other parts of the world, corporates take active interest in who the system is going to be generating, because they know that they want to absorb people of a particular level of quality. So yes, there is a role for government, but then there's a role for all of us. My child is in a public school. We are now fighting because there's a part of their maths textbook where there's something that is glaringly wrong, but it has been published. I can only fight that fight because she's in a public school. She was in a private school. I may perhaps not see that. How do we keep our social consciousness awake, even sometimes where there's a relative comfort, because we are going to be held responsible for the country that we give our children. I would leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DG. Yeah, it's rough. We are going to now take questions from the floor. If we can maybe do them in tranches of 3, wherever there's a mic, if you can just move it on. Please raise your hands if you've got a question. That's 1, 2, and 3 to start off with. Can we please have a roaming mic? You can pull this one if you need. Okay. There's a gentleman there, Baba, with the jacket, the brown jacket at the back as well. Okay, because the lady's got a mic already, can we start with her and then we'll get to you in there?
Thank you
Sona,
very
over
much.
to you.
Thank you. And I think my question is to the DG. And it is, first and foremost, I appreciate all that has been said. And we spoke about the fact that we have lost the moral high ground. And it seems as if right now we are defending even the legislation that we put in place to support the growth, the development of Blacks in this country. It is now easy to bring in, literally, it is now easy to bring in white people into into leadership because that consciousness is lost. The challenge that I have is, again, if you look at the Employment Equity Act, if I looked at what was proposed in February of 2023 and what is proposed right now, these are chalk and cheese. It seems as if we are regressing and we are not even trying to uphold a moral high ground. This makes the battle quite steep and the conversation continue to be difficult in the spaces that we serve. I want to find out from the DG as to how do we continue to fight this battle when we don't necessarily have the support nor the arsenal that is required in order to make these conversations or progress in these particular conversations. Right now, it is very difficult. It is disheartening. And you spoke about the fact that it is not, this is not the time for us to be fatigued about transformation. But I feel what we are doing from trade does not help us in any shape nor form. Actually, it makes it difficult for us.
Thank you. I'll take the second question and the third one and then allow the DG to respond and whoever else has been allocated.
Thank you very much. I must say that coming to this engagement and a host of questions, but the conversation has completely shifted my perspective. So thank you very much to the panelists for a very engaging discussion. I'm going to start just briefly with the hypothesis and the question in general to all the panelists. If you look at constitutionally the design of a democracy, I believe that it's premised on one very important thing, and it's something called an active citizenry. Now, if you look at what it means to be an active citizen, it assumes that you're in a position to fully understand the system which you're within, and then to take that understanding and transform it into tangible actions to adjust the system towards the outcomes that you want to realize. My problem is that, going back to the point about education, because I was raised by two public school teachers, and by and large, my family has been beneficiaries either directly through employment or myself in my bursaries, just like yourself. So I'm a two Sona Tintswalo, but I've benefited from access to opportunities through our government, and I'm very grateful for that. But it's a crying shame that I realized only when I started later on, after being an engineer, working with government in various projects, that it's in those projects that I actually even learned that there are three spheres of government doing three different things, and there are actually three arms of government who all need to do their job and not overlap. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that I don't think we've spent enough time actually teaching people about the system that they're actually meant to be changing. And if you don't change that, it is very difficult to have people own the very mechanisms that they should depend upon and co-govern to realize change. So my view is the know-how that is missing in South Africa is a deep understanding and intentional implementation of people being active, not just in Mbizo, but being active in interpreting green papers, white papers, the policies, the bills, and then saying that this line over here is not going to work. Not waiting for an intermediary at a technical academic level to hopefully interpret how you feel and perceive, and then go back and then say, this is how things should look. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes,
It's working.
thank you.
You know, coming from the struggle background, there's two, I don't know, two themes or something there that always resonates with me. One is each one teach one. We've forgotten about that as Black people. We're very happy with high horses. And BMF was actually formed on the back of that. The other one, the other slogan was, Black men, you're on your own. Those two, you know, themes or slogans have been very, very important to basically shape the advocacy and the thought leadership within the BMF. I mean, I joined BMF 1992, and in Cape Town, for that matter. I mean, you know, that was one of the most difficult environments ever. But these two things, these two slogans took us from here to there. I mean, we could groom a person that we would want to take over as a CEO at Shell. You know, we didn't just sit back and say, show us your CV and, you know, you will be chosen by the panel. Somebody will be identified, and we would make sure that, I mean, you know, we build, you know, enablement around that person, not empowerment, enablement, making sure that, I mean, that person can perform, because that person is actually representing our aspirations. And I think, I mean, this thing of Black people not being appointed anymore in top positions is because you are on your own, right? There's no support structure. There's no enablement, there's nothing. You're just out in the cold on your own. And that's why it's easy for you even to lose your track when it comes to ideology. You could actually be a front. You could even try and convince Black people of how good the system is. Because you're on your own. I mean, nobody's shaping your thinking. You don't understand that, I mean, you've got a responsibility. Excellence is something that is far from you, because, I mean, there's nobody who's actually taking you to task to start saying, but I hear your colleagues at Nedbank are not really happy with your performance. What's going on? You're not really performing. So you're not making a case for Black people. And at that time, I mean, one of the things that we also had at BMF was, I mean, we had people doing work in particular industries and sussing out what are the key capabilities that are required in order to lead some of those industries. And I think that's why, I mean, earlier on, we had like accounting firms, which Black accounting firms, which were world-class. I mean, which could really, go toe-to-toe with the best in the world. But because, I mean, we had this enablement mentality, enablement environment. So we're never gonna make it for as long as we believe that, you need to be standing on your own. Never.
Thank you, sir. Sure, thank you for those comments and those insights. Maybe to start off with Sisloni's question, DG, Sisloni asked about the regression, about how do we continue fighting? We mentioned earlier that we should not be going through transformation fatigue, but how do you continue when the system that you're trying to build is a system that seems like it's working against you? Do you have a response for, and anybody else in the panel, if you do have feedback for Sisloni as well, you're more than welcome. But let's start with you, DG.
No, thank you very, very much. I suppose one of the things about corporate environment, private sector in South Africa is that it does, particularly when you're Black and you're one of the few, it does have a very isolating effect. You can be in the boardroom, everybody smiles, but as soon as we all leave the boardroom, we jump into our cars. Some guys can go and have their golf and all of that, but you are waiting for Monday. And I think one of the things that is becoming very critical is that let us network. Let's build kind of coalitions that allow us to be able to deal with things. Somebody said something very crucial. Some of these things are bigger than any one person. And I think institutions such as the BMF, and that's playing a very important role of ringing the bell and allowing people to be able to kind of exhale. Transformation is not anti-white. And it's not about saying, well, then these are just Black issues. No, they're not. We're dealing with national issues, and you do need to have like-minded people also coming together. How do we also allow other races to come into the conversation so that we can shape an outcome that can work for all of us? But beyond, I think the big things, they're small but important things. Somebody was talking about, we make it intentional to support including supporting Black business. One of the things that we're championing here in the DTIC is this issue of local procurement. Can we buy things that are produced in South Africa? We all talk about this high unemployment, but there are some consumption behaviors that in one way or another very well be contributing to that, where at a corporate level, sitting in important procurement meetings, we're not pushing that, let's buy local so that we support our own and building of our own capabilities. All these big things about innovation and even skills for the future, we don't build them in the sky. We build them in the act of perfecting systems, perfecting products. And when people don't have even an opportunity to build products because nobody will turn an eye to what they are building, that's a problem. So Black professionals in the procurement field, are we pushing enough for supply development that makes sense? Not this time management courses that are very nice, but they're not taking us anywhere. And support for things beyond just oneself. I spoke about, let's support our local schools. Because it's when you get involved that you see where the fault lines are beyond the big policy discussions. And you're able to engage with the principal, with the regional supervisor, and with these people in order to push for change. But I won't be the one to say that it's not a challenging environment. But fact of the matter is, if we don't understand which generation we are going to allow weakness to seep in, when in actual fact, it's time for all of us to stand and shine. And that doesn't mean that it becomes easy. It means that we do what we're called to do. I hope that helps.
Thank you, DG. The two gentlemen spoke about, I think one of the key themes there was around giving access to the type of training that will allow for the growth, right? Saying that you had to get into the world of work to realize that there are things that you needed to learn before you got there. And you are saying, sir, that, it was the mandate of the BMF to actually groom people, so to do proper talent management, to manage the pipeline, because what we find now is that we find appointments being made, and then we get a shock, how did this happen? Did they not work on succession planning? But who is responsible for doing that type of succession planning? Earlier, the DG spoke about the fact that she was looking at the textbook at her daughter's school. I don't know if any of you are aware. Last year, the physics paper had errors. The physics matric final paper had errors. So it's some of those challenges that, especially in public schools, the kids are faced with. But I mean, I'll start with yourself, Professor Foster-Pedley, to maybe respond to the two gentlemen's comments around the deep understanding and interpretation of what needs to be done when you get into the world of work. And most importantly, not acting surprised when things happen, when people are appointed, where there was no deliberate and no concerted effort made to actually make sure that this person is ready. And then giving people, when you put them in these roles, giving them honest feedback to say, listen, you are not working in line with what we're looking for or how you're appointed, and you're not taking the support. You are not positioning the narrative that we have taught you. How do we fix that? If maybe we can start with you and go around.
Yeah, I mean, am I on? Okay. Just going back to something that Professor Wiseman said as well about that, there's lost people who can rise up. If you take that 95% of people who don't get degrees, they go to work, and they do start doing work way above their qualification level at work. You'll know them. You know people who've got matric or maybe a diploma. They're doing work at master's level, actually, but they haven't had the access. They start to believe they're not clever. They start to believe they're not intelligent. It erodes their self-worth. How can I do it? And they've missed it because they've got families. We need to create a form of education that captures those people while they're working, family-friendly, allows them to do stuff on stuff that's immediately useful, business-related stuff. You can't learn management in a classroom, but you can facilitate it from the classroom very, very cleverly if you want to do it by using exactly the same principles that you both have talked about, which I deeply respect what you've said. So I thoroughly agree with what you're saying. We have to build people up all the time. And an education organization must have that belief in people, that you're building people. I mean, I'll talk about, we build a people who build the businesses that build Africa. It's not a slogan. That directs everything we do. So unless we know that they can build businesses, we know we failed. So that's the point. And I think the whole of the education system must start to do that. We can do this. It's not like things are lost. You know, I'm chair of the Association of African Business Schools, so I've seen many business schools around Africa, all parts of Africa. We're very, very well endowed here in South Africa. We talk ourselves down, but actually, compared with what's going on in many other places, we are in a really good position. I think it's a question of belief. I start to believe it's a question of belief and activism. So I follow you, and I follow you, and I follow you, and I follow you. I would love to be on your team. That's what I would like to do, and try and make this work. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Mpho?
So, I think I have two comments. So one, regarding the grooming and supporting each other, I fully agree. And I think it goes back to my other point about we need to be intentional about everything. We need to be intentional about supporting each other. And I think for me, then goes back to the issue around mentorship, which you were raising. I think we need to pick that up. We need to pick up networking events. We need to pick up connecting, upcoming young leaders to, the ones that have run the race already, and, to hand over the stick to take over the race. So we certainly need that. And so for me, what was quite interesting when I studied abroad to do my second master's was there were scheduled networking events, and there were scheduled work readiness programs. And it was, I honestly enjoyed that. And it was new to me, even though I had went to a prestigious university, University of Pretoria. We didn't have that. If there were, they were certainly not available for Black students. So that's the other place where we can start. It also goes back to the issue around active, being an active citizen and giving back to the community. I think the one thing that I've also realized, and I think, I believe this is a forum where, we can be open and honest with each other and be, self-critical of each other. How many of us go back to our communities and give back and support the schools? For me, that's definitely one thing that is lacking in the Black community. And you see it in your white schools. Yes, most, our fellow white people are in positions of power, and they're able to channel funds to their schools from the businesses and not necessarily from their pockets, and support, sports in those schools. But with the little that we have, what are we doing to give back to our communities? So beyond, teaching, citizens of the country about, these are the spheres of government, this is how it works, this, is how legislation is passed. It's also about building our communities and giving back. And I'm certainly guilty of that, I did my primary schooling in a village, Hans, in Mokopane. And I haven't set foot there in forever. Some of my nieces and nephews go to the school, but I haven't been there to check what support can I give. And the issue of sport, it's also important. We know there's no longer sport in Black communities, and that's why most of our young people are also lost, because they're not active outside of the, strict curriculum. And we also need to acknowledge that not everybody is academically gifted. What are the offsets that we are providing our young people? So I think for me, the issue around networking is important. We need to be intentional about it. The issue about being an active citizen and going back to the community, we also need to be very self-critical, because I think it's lacking in the Black community. I think it's lacking in the Black community. So we need to be intentional about it. But having said that, I don't want us to be disheartened, because personally, I have benefited from networking. I have benefited from other Black people supporting me. I remember when I started off as a young graduate at the National Treasury. My friend, she had started it a year earlier than I started. She took my hand, took me to a separate boardroom and said, Mpho, here you need to perform. People are going to tolerate poor work for one presentation only. You only have one chance to not perform. After that, you need to put your best foot forward. And she armed me with resources. It wasn't just, Mpho, you need to perform. She armed me with resources to say, you need to do 1, 2, 3. This is how you can help yourself put your best foot forward. And throughout my career, I must admit, I've had a lot of Black people coming to me and saying, Mpho, this is the environment that you are entering. This is what you need to be aware of. So the support is there. The support is still there. And I don't want us to be disheartened thinking that it's not there. It's still there, and I've definitely benefited from it.
Thank you so much, Yasmin.
So let's get the next question. I'll make a comment at the end.
Okay. Can we get, maybe just 2 questions. The lady here, if we can get a mic, and that gentleman. There's a gentleman there. Yes, ma'am, over to you.
Thanks so much, and thanks to our panel for such an interesting conversation. 2 comments, one on the moral high ground. When we started, Prof highlighted this issue of having lost the moral high ground. I wonder if perhaps we can't consider the moral high ground to be passed around almost like a baton in our society. Because in a pre-apartheid South Africa, there was never an expectation for the state to hold the moral high ground. The state never had the moral high ground. In fact, they were public enemy number 1, and the moral high ground was in the hands at the time of the people. The moral high ground was sitting with political parties that have since lost that moral high ground. It was never sitting with business because business was probably public enemy number 2. And so to expect the state now to hold that moral high ground is perhaps an expectation that is difficult to be met, given the fact that they have never seen a state hold a moral high ground. But we as civil society, we as the supposed active citizens, we have the opportunity to continue to hold a moral high ground. We have the opportunity to influence the organizations in which we are. We have an opportunity to influence the state and the leaders that we put into power. And so I think this conversation of the moral high ground is an important one, but we also need to appreciate that for the society to work, all of us need to hold a certain level of high ground. And all of us need to be able to call out players that are not coming to the table. I think one of the greatest successes of an apartheid government was that it was able to push in the same direction. Government and business were in cahoots to make sure that some of us were left out of the economy, and it was extremely successful. We now have a business and a government that seems to be at loggerheads. And we need to find a way as the holders of the moral high ground to get them back to the table so that we can have conversations that bring our society closer together. I think a lot of people in the room can identify at some level with being Dintswalo. But if we go back to the statistics that Prof shared, Dintswalo is essentially 12% of the population, right? Which means if we were to distill the president's speech, the policies that have been put in place over the last couple of years have succeeded in building a middle class, people who have access to opportunity, and there are about 12% of us. 4 of those have degrees in that 12%, but we have this 12. Before Dintswalo, those of you that may be old enough to remember, we had Thandi. Thandi is still the average South African. Thandi only breaks above the poverty line at age 65 when she goes on state pension. What are we doing as Dintswalos to pull out Thandis so that there can be more of us Dintswalos? We cannot not celebrate the creation of Dintswalos because we need them to drive the economy forward. But if as Dintswalos we are failing to go back for Thandis as institutions, as government, as individuals, as civil society, we're going to find ourselves where we are expecting too much of the holders of the perceived moral high ground when actually the platform remains burning and 12% of us are not enough to sustain the South African economy.
Thank you for that. So you're basically saying that Inswalo and Mpho need to lift as they rise. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. I think for me, it's more of a comment, particularly around what the DG was saying. And I think the lack of a radical approach to transformation also speaks to the ideology that a lot of, Black professionals and particularly young professionals like myself, there's a lack of ideology that speaks to why we see a lot of gaps where people, and context is everything in this case, where we've become so complacent that we don't realize that as a nation and as a very young democracy, ideology has played a very big part in the division and where we are today. So I just wanted to comment around that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Prof, over to you.
Yeah,
And also please add your
okay.
closing remarks.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversations. Yes, no, I agree with most of the comments, even the comments on the issue of ethics, the pushback now on, legislation programs that really promote empowerment and transformation. Yeah, but on issue then of the moral ground, just to make sure that I'm sure we're aligned, but I just want to make the point that really for society for us as a country to go forward, there must be high levels of trust at all levels. Trust comes by when we as individuals, we are trustworthy in terms of how we behave, and that when we are positioned, we don't use those funds only to enrich ourselves, but to contribute to a bigger public good. So really that is there. But having said that, as society, we have got a duty, if we expect ourselves to be held to those high standards of ethical conduct, competence, and serving the public interest, we must even hold our politicians to meet even higher standards. You see? So really, again, the fault that we have got leaders in politics who are not really meeting the expected levels of competence, devotion to serving the public interest, as well as ethical conduct, is our fault. It's us as voters, it's civil society. We are not playing the role that we should play. So really, what you said about understanding the constitution, the system, and all that, and then these things can get right. But really, politicians, especially the head of state, has so much power, resources under his or her control, and so on. Surely, we as a country, we should not play the game that we have been playing. There must be clear standards that guide us in terms of who we allow to be at that position. So if we don't get that right, yeah, we're going to again make the same. So I was making that point, but really, possibly the other point that I just want to make, especially talking to BMF members, possibly our advocacy was easier in the early years. Why? We're dealing with one political party. And that political party had as its primary purpose for its existence was to destroy apartheid and bring freedom to Black people and opportunity to get out of poverty. So when we go to them and say, we've got this, we're voting now, but this is not going to give us the things that you are so central in your vision. It was easy to do that. But now you have to be, your message must be so powerful and be based on evidence, and you must have the capabilities to actually present it in a convincing way, not one political party to to South Africans across the board. So advocacy is going to be more demanding going forward, but it's necessary because we have, as I said, if we continue on the path we are going to leave millions and millions that are going to grow of Africans as an underclass in poverty. And you'll remember this, even if we come here to 2050, there'll be millions of Africans if we don't deal with what we said in education and we don't really defend the question of saying there are still elements of racism, of prejudice, and that those things need to be fought through these policies and setting targets that we must move forward. So it's easy when you're educated sometimes to miss this, but the reality, look, if you can look as statistics that I'm talking about, what is happening to the number of Africans who are unemployable and unemployed. Those numbers are increasing. It should worry you. Even if you're educated, so really, advocacy is going to be very important, but we must have also courage to deal with the deep structural issues, especially the one that I talk about building the scientific and technological capacity of this country. Yes, I agree, including managerial capacity in that.
Thank you so much. DG, I'd like to give you 60 seconds, sorry to put you under pressure, but we need to be cognizant of time, just to give your closing remarks, please.
No, I think, thank you very much. And thank you to all the panelists, to all the participants for this discussion. I think my closing remarks would be that I would hope that maybe the BMF would see how through these discussions that we've had, there can be a program, proper program that is developed just to take one or two of the aspects that were put on the table forward. If we're able to do that, I think it will be a great achievement out of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Prof, your closing remarks?
Thank you for the education too. Thank you very much. And for the inspiration that you've given. It's been phenomenal from everyone here. I've really benefited from it. I think I'm going away with the thought that I agree with you about democratic institutions. We have to learn about those. I agree with you about the mentoring and support. But we need a goal. And there is a goal. You have this much money in these many people's hands, and you have this much money in that many people's hands. Irregardless of how we get there, the redistribution of wealth will create equalities. You cannot build South Africa with these inequalities. And the nature of it is, it's a black inequality. It's absolutely clear. And you can't build a country like that. It's impossible. Let's just accept it's impossible and work out how the heck to do it. Maybe black economic empowerment is the way, maybe partially the way. Maybe there are many other things that over time will shift the balance by education, by health, by sponsorship, by changing the form of education, by getting businesses to support TVETs, vitalize the TVET sector so people don't all have to be academics and they can do, some people do it later in life. Whatever it takes, let's change our Gini coefficient and let's make the country worth something we want to be proud of for our grandchildren.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Awesome, Prof.
Yeah, for me, it's we need to be intentional. Those are my closing remarks. We need to be intentional about each and everything that we do. Things are not just going to happen because, we want them to happen. We aspire for them to happen. We need to remember that the apartheid government, as she pointed out, that it was intentional. It was intentional about excluding Black people from education, from participating in the economy. So we also need to be intentional, and we need to be unapologetic about broad-based economic empowerment. We can't have a society where 80% of the population is Black, but the wealth is in 20% of the minority. We can't. So we need to be intentional. And we shouldn't only rely on government about where we want to get to. I have the power to be intentional, to give back to the community and pull up the people that have been left behind. You have the power. You have to be intentional about supporting Black businesses. And the other thought is that, You know, we tend to complain about services that we get from Black businesses, but we also need to realize that with experience, you get better. So maybe, yes, we need to tolerate, you know, that initial poor experience, those cakes which are not as good as, you know, the ones at, you know, bakery in Sandton. But the more, you know, that baker at home in your street, the more she has experience baking, the more she gets better. That's the only way she's going to get better. How is she going to get better if you don't support her? So we need to be intentional. We need to be intentional about broad-based economic empowerment, and we have the power here. We don't have to wait for government.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So it's really been a vibrant conversation. Thank you so much to my esteemed panelists. I think you've given us and shedded light. You know, like you said, when we all came in here, we all had our own view of the Sona. The gentleman also said he had many questions and then kind of got something and he said, okay, maybe I've got a comment rather than questions, but we need to continue with the questions. We need to continue the dialogue. There's been call to action. The DG has positioned it to say, BMF, I'm asking you to come and support, right? Whoever's sitting in corporate or sitting in positions of power, we're saying to you, make the effort, support youngsters who are coming in. Lift them as you rise, because there's no way that they can do better without that. We need to do better. You spoke about vocational work and TVETs. The contribution and the investment that needs to be made into TVET colleges is phenomenal, but nobody's giving them the attention. The other esteemed universities get a lot of money. You were saying that some of the white parents, they leave their alumni and they constantly give money. They no longer need your money necessarily because the school fees are going up anyway. But the TVET colleges sitting in Soshanguve, etc., they need a fuel injection. They need some money from institutions that we are supporting, that we are working for. So please, let's consider that. As my parting shot, in terms of the journey that we're on as a country, in terms of the journey that the BMF is on, I think we all again need to continue to try and make this work. We have to. This is the South Africa that we are in. Nobody, fortunately, here has said, I'm leaving, I'm leaving. Nobody's going to take you anyway. So. But I'd like to leave you maybe with the words from Octavia Butler, right? As we are about to go into the elections, as the BMF is also going through its own transition, I'd like to remind you of her words, and I quote, choose your leaders with wisdom and forethought. To be led by a coward is to be controlled by all that coward fears. To be led by a fool is to be led by the opportunists who control that fool. To be led by a thief is to offer up your most precious treasures to be stolen. To be led by a liar is to ask to be told lies. And to be led by a tyrant is to sell yourself and those you love into slavery. With that said, I'd like to call on the acting BMF president, Lily, to please come and close off for us so that people can go and network and get to know each other a bit better and open opportunities. But thank you and travel safe.
Before we close, we've got some gifts for you. Can I ask the MD just to come up so that we can just give you the gifts? Can you also come up, please? Yeah, as you hand the gift, can the photo, yeah, we just have a quick photo.
We'll take a group one after. Present, we'll take a group one after. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And then can we just get a group photo quickly?
Okay. In the front hand. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much. Thank you so much to our panel, our facilitator. You were absolutely brilliant. Thank you so, so much. Thank you so much, the panel and everybody who's online, who joined us. Thank you very much. I think today what stood out for me is for most of us who grew up with grandparents, you know the art of storytelling. Yeah. The minute you get told those stories, you get inspired to become a better person. The storytelling gives you a vision of what you can become in the future. And the whole Sona was around that storytelling. And this is what we are going to push as the BMF to say, how do we celebrate the successes that we do have? How do we get into a room where we share ideas and also identify areas of improvement? It is only through that that we can grow, not only as Black people, but as a nation. We need to get together and start sharing the lovely stories. It's not so dark and so gloom as it might seem. There is positive things that is happening that we need to celebrate. So definitely today, that stood out for me, that we need to celebrate Black successful people. We need to celebrate what we have been through and what we have accomplished. And that comes to you as managers. How do you get yourself in an environment where you are exposing yourself, where you can celebrate and talk about these issues? BMF is the best place to do it. There's no other place. You go to any political party, you won't do it. Come to the BMF where you can engage with people of your level and talk about issues that matter. The second thing is around ethical and moral leadership. I think it was mentioned so many times that it starts with you as an individual, unfortunately. We all get into an environment that transforms you and changes you, but ethically, it's how you were brought up, what you've been exposed to, and what are you exposing yourself to? Where do you see yourself a couple of years from now? How do you get there? Who do you surround yourself with to get there? So it's very, very important that we need to get together as Black people, as Black managers. Network with your people. The BMF has got a student chapter, a young professional, we've got corporates. There's different kinds of people where you can engage on different kinds of ideas. You will not get that anywhere else except in the BMF. And then lastly, a take home is, how do we become role models to those at home? How do you go back to your community and be seen as a role model? Our country is in a serious crisis where we are celebrating getting tenders and getting part of a political party, but we are not celebrating people like us who are here, who are saying, I want to make a change, I want to make that difference. So I want to plead with you that make it your mission at least to become a role model to one person. One individual look at you and say, that BMF member inspires me to become better at what I do. And it can only start with you and you becoming part of the Black Management Forum as well. So I want to thank you very, very much for coming through. I know we are all tired and we are all hungry. We can't wait just to go outside and network and mingle. But the fact that you are here shows that you are willing to make that change and make that difference. For that, we want to thank you and we want to thank our panel. We want to thank the MD and the whole office for organizing this. And Henley, round of applause for Henley. The support and the partnership with BMF, it's going stronger and stronger. And thank you very much, Prof, for allowing this to happen. Really, we really, really appreciate it as the BMF. We'll definitely come again. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of your evening and travel home safely. Thank you. And Alexander Forbes, thank you. How could I forget? Thank you so much.